During this summer's war with Hezbollah, an Israeli patrol under Colonel Efroni is headed for the place on the northern border where the Lebanese militia first crossed into Israel in July.
Right, let's go now.
This road separates Israel from Lebanon. It has become the front line in the conflict.
Right, that's where the war started, here. Okay, exactly in this place where the Hezbollah kidnapped the soldiers.
Hezbollah's militants allegedly have support from Iran. The colonel is looking for clues that they're directly involved.
Piece of one of the mortar that was shot here when the kidnapping took place. That's a 120mm shell made in Iran.
But to Israel, Iran poses an even more deadly threat. Its president calls publicly for the elimination of what he terms the Zionist regime.
I believe him because he's building the weapons for this extermination. And everything that we know says that if he can get away with it, he'll do it.
Iran is the only member of the United Nations that threatens publicly to destroy another member of the United Nations. It's a call for genocide.
Israel's military and political leaders are convinced that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. This is the inside story of their thinking on how and when to deal with that threat.
Once a leader like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is repeating again and again the intention of how he's going to use such a nuke bomb, we cannot wait and count the days until it will happen.
On July the 12th, within hours of a kidnap raid by Hezbollah soldiers, Israel launches airstrikes into southern Lebanon. Hezbollah fires dozens of Katyusha rockets across the border into Israeli towns. Casualties on both sides are severe, and the conflict escalates into all-out war.
Right now, Israelis feel under attack. Katyusha rockets fired by Hezbollah have been landing here in northern Israel and in other towns. And Israel's message to Hezbollah, to those firing the rockets, will be this: Israel will go after its enemies, no matter what the consequences.
The international community criticizes Israel's airstrikes for being disproportionate and causing heavy casualties in civilian areas.
I would say that this seems to me an excessive use of force in an area with so many civilians.
If it's an excessive use of force, that makes it a war crime.
It makes it a violation of humanitarian law.
Hezbollah is accused by Amnesty International of breaching humanitarian law by deliberately targeting civilians. Israel claims that behind the scenes, Iran is actively supplying the militants.
We consider them as the long arm of the Iranians. They have 14,000 rockets that are threatening Israel, and they are supporting terror.
Israel's troops repeatedly find evidence of what they say is Iran's involvement. Inside an abandoned Hezbollah bunker, Iranian pictures are on display alongside the group's own leaders. Throughout the fighting, Colonel Efroni claims Iran's fingerprints have been visible around Hezbollah.
What we found during the fighting, a lot of ammunition and anti-tank missiles that come from Iran. New ammunition, not something that you got 20 years ago. Fresh missiles made in 2004, 2002. Someone have to bring them to Hezbollah. It's not something that you can buy in the market. It's not something that you can buy off the counter. There's a cooperation between the two, Iran and Hezbollah, and you can see it everywhere.
Despite its overwhelming military superiority, when the guns fall silent, Israel still cannot claim complete victory. In the wider Middle East, the celebrations of what is seen as Hezbollah's Islamic victory spread from Beirut to Cairo and Tehran. But in Israel, Intelligence is emerging of what is perceived there as a far greater danger than Hezbollah. A few miles from Israel's beachfront, Arrow interceptor rockets stand ready to shield the country from incoming missiles. The launch system has recently been upgraded, and it can now deal with the possibility of nuclear warheads, potentially fired from Iran. Israel is incredibly guarded about its defense systems. This satellite control room is a high security area, which keeps constant watch over Israel's surveillance satellites. This is a rare view inside. For over a decade, Israel's military has been studying Iran's research sites. They are now convinced that under cover of its peaceful nuclear energy program, Iran is developing atomic weapons.
A month after I was elected, I said that the greatest threat we all face, not just Israel, but all of the free world, is a nuclear-armed Iran. This was 10 years ago. That warning fell at that time on all ears. The arming of Iran with atomic bombs, ayatollahs with atomic bombs, is a palpable threat to all of us.
Moshe Ya'alon is the former chief of staff of Israel's armed forces. He is rarely interviewed, but he believes Israel is facing such a serious threat from Iran that he's willing to speak out.
This Iranian regime is determined to have the indigenous know-how in terms of producing nuclear bomb. We should prevent them the know-how. Otherwise, it will be up to them to decide when to produce or to use the bomb.
This country is obsessed with its own safety from attack. The army is part of every citizen's life, with Israel continually on guard against potentially hostile neighbors.
You sometimes feel very lonely. The chair of Prime Minister of Israel, I once talking to Clinton, compared it. I said that, you know, to one, America is like driving on a wide highway. To lead Israel is like walking on a rope, having to balance yourself with every slight mistake. You can slip down in irrevocable way.
Israel's history consists of wars with the Arab nations all around it. In the 1967 Six-Day War, it fought the armies of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Israel's overwhelming air power destroyed the Egyptian Air Force in a matter of hours. In Israel, it was regarded as a victory in a fight for survival they had to win.
We use the spirit, and we use another thing which maybe doesn't exist in any other air forces in the world, and we call it the no alternative. And when you don't have alternatives, you can achieve such achievements as we did in this war.
But even then, Israel was developing an alternative which could make it invulnerable in the Middle East. For the last 40 years, the state has been protected by its own nuclear arsenal, as many as 200 warheads according to the Carnegie Institute. Yet Israel has never resorted to using them.
In 58 years, we were attacked 5 times by armies, 3 times by Intifada. We were outgunned, outnumbered. There was a danger to our existence. Yet, when we started our nuclear option, I told to the then President of the United States who asked me about it, President Kennedy, I told him Israel does not intend to introduce nuclear weapons to the Middle East, and that remains our policy to this very day.
Shimon Peres began Israel's nuclear research center at Dimona nearly 50 years ago. Yet it officially remains a state secret. Israel calls its policy nuclear ambiguity.
Ambiguity is not a bomb. Ambiguity is an attitude. And if the ones who want to destroy Israel have an ambiguous fear, it's okay. Then you don't need bombs.
But with the perceived threat from Iran, cracks are starting to appear in Israel's commitment to its policy.
Let's say the Iranian will explode an experimental device. It's very dangerous for Israel to know that Iran has this capability and to let the Iranian think that maybe we don't have it.
If an Arab or Muslim country acquires and wields nuclear weapons, this will force a realignment in the entire Middle East, in the world, in fact. And certainly Israel will have to consider its long-held policies as well.
If it is threatened, Israel's first line of defense would be here. The Army's huge array of conventional weapons are developed by a highly sophisticated defense industry, boosted by over $2 billion a year in US subsidy to buy American arms. At the Rafael missile factory in northern Israel, a site rarely filmed, state-of-the-art weapons are being put together.
Papa is a very accurate missile. The pilot sees on the small screen, sees the target, and can direct the missile in a very accurate way. And even he can choose a window, bunker door, whatever. Very, very precise.
The man who designed Israel's defense systems for many years believes this precision technology is crucial to his country's survival.
We are outnumbered by our neighbors, and the only way to survive in this hostile Middle East is to develop those technologies that will give us some qualitative edge upon the numbers.
Despite this technological advantage, the alleged nuclear weapons project in Iran presents Israel's leaders with a new order of threat.
For the first time since the establishment of Israel 58 years ago, we are viewing in front of us an existential threat against Israel.
The big problem is the conjunction between extremist ideology and military capabilities. It's like your neighbor, he has a gun, and he declares every day that he's going to kill you. That's the big problem.
Israel's fears are distilled in this man, Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. 2 months into his presidency, he issues a death sentence against Israel.
There's been strong condemnation of the Iranian president's demand for the destruction of Israel, coming after the country launched its first satellite into space today. It has prompted calls for Iran to be removed from the UN.
In Farsi, Ahmadinejad's words are, the regime occupying Jerusalem, that's Israel, should be eliminated from the pages of history. On this issue, Israel's most senior politicians speak with one voice. The Prime Minister even creates an advisory group made up of his predecessors to discuss the Iranian threat.
I think when you face a threat unlike anything we've seen, a threat to the very existence of a country that Iran says it could wipe out with one bomb, then it's something that is beyond politics.
On the streets of Israel, President Ahmadinejad's statement is regarded as bordering on a declaration of war. The defense minister's most senior intelligence advisor believes Israel should be on its guard.
Iran is not suggesting to exterminate the United States or Europe or Saudi Arabia. They declare very clearly that their goal is to destroy Israel. And based on the historic lessons and based on the understanding of the nature of this leadership, it's recommended to listen to them seriously and to react accordingly.
Nobody would like to see another genocide. A nuclear bomb can become like a concentration camp, a flying bomb, a flying camp. Nobody would like to see a comeback to the times of the Nazis.
Israeli soldiers are conducting a regular emergency rescue exercise based on the premise of a large rocket hitting a primary school. The exercise assumes the rocket is fired from outside Israel with a conventional warhead. But Israel's leaders are deeply conscious that the same type of missile fired from Iran could carry a nuclear payload. And for those Israelis who have fought in previous conflicts, the possibility of an atomic strike is a reminder of how fragile Israel is.
I carry with me an old experience from the time as a young colonel in the Yom Kippur War. I remember calling my wife at the end of the fighting. I remember her crying over the phone when she heard the list of all our friends who were killed through this. And then I came back to California. When I went to the first football game afterward, I realized that if we did not manage to win this war, Israel would become a part of history and not a single football game would have been cancelled. And I carried this memory with me to the chair of the Prime Minister. Ultimately, we are standing alone.
In the past, this feeling of isolation has led Israel to go it alone. In 1981, Iraq was on the point of acquiring nuclear power. The Osirak reactor was an experimental plutonium plant. The fear was it could ultimately be made to produce weapons-grade fuel. With America then supporting Saddam Hussein, Israel decided to step in and destroy the reactor by itself. General Eitan Ben Eliyahu was one of the pilots involved in the raid. He later served as the commander of the Israeli Air Force.
You wake up in the morning, you know that there's going to be a very important flight today. You try to balance between your mission, your ideology, to your fear.
The Israeli Air Force used its brand new F-16 fighters to spearhead the mission, flying low along the Saudi border and taking the Iraqi defenses by surprise.
Everything was done under full secrecy. Saddam Hussein was busy in a war against Iran. So the best idea was to sneak in silence, and then the day after, everybody understood it. You did feel in every single minute that you're gonna step into something that it is going to be historic.
At that time, we could, by a single strike, eliminate the Iraqi capacity for, we believed at the time, 5 to 8 years. Eventually, it ended up that it was forever.
Everything went smooth, not even one single mistake, and the mission was accomplished 100%, maybe more than 100%. No failures, no casualties. You feel it for the rest of your life, actually, that you participated in something which maybe not have changed the world, but changed the destiny of your country.
In Israel, it was seen as proof that a unilateral strike could work against a nuclear threat.
But at the time, we should remember, the whole world condemned Israel for doing this. From the Europeans to President Reagan, only to agree years later how far-sighted Prime Minister Begin of Israel was by ordering our Air Force to destroy it.
As Israel's latest generation of pilots passes out, Some Israelis are calling for another preemptive strike.
The point with Iran is very simple. Iran is determined at this moment to achieve nuclear capabilities. It has the scientific infrastructure, it has the resolve and the money. And it's not easy to stop Iran.
Bushehr in western Iran, where the country's first nuclear reactor is about to become operational. Iran says the use of atomic technology to generate power is permitted under international treaty, but Israel's military elite is growing increasingly alarmed.
In the 90s, we realized that they had a clandestine military nuclear project. What for? It's not for energy, it is not for self-defense. So we identified the first signs of early warning regarding to Iranian nuclear capability.
Israeli intelligence have kept a close watch on the inheritor of this long-term project, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, since he came to power last year. They know relatively little of his early life. He trained as a civil engineer, and after Ayatollah Khomeini came to power, he joined the Revolutionary Guard. Some Israelis think the president's attacks on Israel are a call for approval from the wider Middle East.
All the statements against Israel and rhetoric about the denial of Holocaust, I think they meant to make the Iranian nuclear issue appear as the problem of Israel. Ahmadinejad is telling the Muslim world and Europe primarily, well, this is not your problem. Our enemy is Israel.
After cartoons satirizing the Prophet Muhammad were published around the world last year, the Iranian newspaper Hamashari has run a competition of drawings on the theme of the Holocaust.
Nothing could be more guaranteed to provoke Israelis. It's perceived as a deliberate insult to their most sensitive history, and it follows several very public denials of the extermination camps by President Ahmadinejad himself.
He says the Holocaust didn't happen. He said 6 million of my people who were burned and gassed by the most savage regime in history, that they didn't die, that this is a hoax. Anybody who perpetrates the big lie is preparing the big massacre.
Israel has monitored Iran's military ever since the 1979 revolution. Their closest attention is now given to the series of longer-range missiles devised in Iran, based on North Korean prototypes.
They had already developed a missile called Shiab-3 with a range enough to cover the distance between Iran and Israel. They are working on Shiab-4, and they had also worked on designing, at least, of applying this missile to carry a nuclear warhead.
According to reported Israeli intelligence, the newer versions of the Shihab would reach not just Israel, but Western Europe.
A nuclear warhead is something which is effective against cities, against populated areas. And there is no difference between a city like Tel Aviv or maybe Hiroshima.
At such moments, Israel turns to its closest ally, which is determined not to allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. Washington does not believe that Iran is in the business of peaceful nuclear energy.
It's not ironclad, but there's a pretty strong circumstantial evidence case that they have a nuclear weapons program.
David Albright worked for the International Atomic Energy Agency, the world's nuclear regulator, and he believes Iran is hiding its true aims.
There's a line at Esfahan looks like it's to make uranium metal for a nuclear weapon. Iran says it's to make 19.9% enriched uranium fuel, but Iran doesn't need that kind of fuel. Iran was working on making polonium-210, which has almost no use beyond initiator of a nuclear weapon. This is the Esfahan uranium conversion facility. It's a large place. One interesting thing here is that they've built a tunnel complex, so you can see they're thinking through the problem of a military strike.
President Bush says he will not permit a nuclear-armed Iran. But Israel's strategists have their doubts about America's resolve to take direct military action. The Bush administration has too much at stake.
What stops the American from doing it is not lack of power or lack of technology or lack of adequate weapons. What stops them is the political issue.
To the Israelis, this is the dilemma. If Iran's nuclear project continues unchecked and America does not act militarily, unthinkable as it may seem, Israel's leaders may decide to go it alone.
I cannot visualize on issues that are very critical for the well-being of the State of Israel, that the State of Israel will do something not at least with a tacit agreement of the United States. But at the end of the day, it's our security. It's our children. It's our future.
For the time being, Israel is prepared to wait, though its leaders believe the diplomatic moves to halt Iran's enrichment program are playing into the hands of Iranian negotiators.
Iran has an inalienable right to develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. And Iran has been prepared to go out of its way in order to ensure and to assure the international community that its program would remain exclusively peaceful.
Israel's diplomats are not convinced. According to the foreign minister, Iran is just trying to buy time, in the belief that once it possesses nuclear weapons, it will be unstoppable.
When they see that there have been three countries in this axis of evil, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea, see what happened to Iraq and what did not happen to North Korea. The conclusion viewed from Tehran is if you want to avoid what happened to Iraq, you have to be in the position that North Korea is in today.
Much depends on Israel's assessment of how far Iran has progressed at Natanz, its heavily guarded uranium enrichment center. The plant is based on 1970s technology bought in the 80s on the nuclear black market. It houses lines of centrifuges which spin uranium gas at 1,000 revolutions a second to make fuel for nuclear reactors. The more centrifuges in a line, the quicker the gas can become weapons-grade fuel. This spring, President Ahmadinejad organized a theatrical set piece to announce a breakthrough to the world. Iran had enriched uranium to the low grades required for reactor fuel.
I am officially announcing that Iran has joined the group of those countries which have nuclear technology. This historic achievement is the result of the Iranian nation's resistance and is the beginning of greater and greater progress and success for the country.
Avi Dichter is the former head of Israel's security service, Shin Bet, who now sits in the Israeli cabinet. He believes Iran's nuclear agenda goes further than the president is admitting.
There is no doubt about the fact that Iran is building a nuke bomb. All intelligence services around the globe, whether it's the CIA, the MI6, the European other intelligence services, and the Israeli Mossad, and the Israeli intelligence of the army, all of them are sharing the same information about the intention of Iran to build a nuke bomb.
Iran is currently allowing international inspectors only limited access to their nuclear sites.
don't think that Iran will hesitate to cheat and take the opportunity of appearing as though they look for civilian energy and in fact trying to produce military bombs.
You could have the development of a parallel program that's undetected. At some point, Iran would get enough centrifuges operating and produce enough highly enriched uranium for a bomb, and you wouldn't even know it happened.
Opinions vary on how long it would take Iran to actually construct a warhead, anything from 3 to 10 years. But for Israel's military leaders, that is not the point.
We all are speaking about a question of a couple of years, not more than that. So in this timetable, something should be done in order to stop this extremist regime.
Israeli intelligence reportedly believes that Iran will reach the point of no return no later than the summer of 2007.
I was an air marshal, and I was trained to open fire towards a terrorist once I identify two things. One, that he has a mean of warfare, a pistol, hand grenade, etc. And the second, that he has an intention to use it in order to kill innocent people. Israel is not going to wait until the first nuclear bomb is going to be dropped on Israel.
Israel's leaders believe the defining moment when Iran proves that it can produce weapons-grade uranium is just around the corner.
As a last resort, the West should be ready to launch military strike to deal with Iranian nuclear capabilities. But Israel should be ready to deal with this kind of threat if anyone else doesn't do it.
In August, the Israeli press reported that the head of Israel's Air Force was masterminding the Iran front. Israel already has squadrons of the long-range F-15 and F-16 fighters at bases in the Negev desert. General Ben Eliyahu has assessed the challenge they might face based on his own experience as a pilot.
You have to think about nothing but the mission. 100% focus on what you do, 100% ready to surprises, because fighting in the air, surprises can come from every direction at every single second.
Military analysts predict that in a real raid, the planes would head out over Jordan and across Iraq, splitting off to attack the key targets. The heavy water plant at Arak, the Esfahan conversion factory, the new reactor at Bushehr, and the enrichment site at Natanz. And Israeli intelligence reportedly knows of other hidden sites that are more difficult to destroy.
Some of them well dug into the side hills with hardly any conventional weapon being able to penetrate. Others in crowded urban areas where any attack could end up with severe collateral damage.
There are a lot of targets, which makes it difficult, But on the other hand, it is difficult for them to protect it.
Israel's pilots are armed with precision-guided weapons, including huge US bunker-busting bombs designed to detonate beneath the surface and capable of penetrating 2 meters of concrete.
There is one thing that you shouldn't think about. You shouldn't be afraid, and you should not think about the option that you might not get back home.
Analysts say the raids would take place at first light, despite the increased risk from anti-aircraft fire and missile defenses. For now, it's just training, but reports suggest that Israel has already devised detailed plans for the raid.
With a good planning, it can be done, no doubt about it.
During this year, the Iranian army has flexed its muscles repeatedly, readying itself for a potential Israeli attack. Israel's military recognizes that any raid on Iran's nuclear sites could unleash a terrible revenge.
Iran, for its part, is ready to defend itself. We're not provoking. We do not want to engage in hostilities, but we will certainly be prepared to defend ourselves if that is imposed on us.
If Iran is attacked and strikes back against Western shipping in the Persian Gulf, where the Iranian Navy has dozens of bases, the price of oil could be the first casualty. But many Israelis fear a concerted backlash from the Islamic world, of which they would bear the brunt, with Hezbollah militants renewing their rocket attacks on northern Israel. This summer's conflict could prove just the first stage in a more protracted war. Israel's defense ministry also thinks that Iran has powerful influence over the militants of Islamic Jihad and Hamas. Israel could face renewed violence anywhere in the world.
The Iranians showed a lot of capacity to sow terror in different corners of the world through an organization without any fingerprint or through other extremist organizations.
We will have to take care of every Jew everywhere in the world if we use force against Iran.
In some Israelis' eyes, the possibility of nuclear attack on Israel's cities is so horrific that the government must act to prevent it.
The real immediate concrete danger is that once Iran turned nuclear, the controls of the world, the advanced world on proliferation will be lost forever. And you might find in a decade from now a crude nuclear device in the hands of terrorist groups.
The raid on the nuclear plant at Osirak 25 years ago shows that Israel is prepared to go it alone at a moment of crisis. Many Israelis think such a time may now be approaching again.
The moment they get it and start to frighten the whole Middle East and the whole world and Israel and to increase their support in terror, it can be too late.
I believe the president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, when he says that he intends to exterminate Israel, to wipe it off the face of the earth. I believe him because he's building the weapons for this extermination. And everything that we know says that if he can get away with it, he'll do it.
Once a leader like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is repeating again and again the intention of how he's going to use such a nuke bomb, we cannot wait and count the days until it will happen.